This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse.
I told you this already off mic, but you have been heavily sought after for years. And I'm so stoked to have you in the seat right now. And truly, after doing research, I'm like, wait a second, I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to put this on you for once. If I was to say, like, when did your career start making sense? Where does that land for you? Is that going back to the University of Minnesota? Is that getting out to New York and getting that Law and Order? Where does it crystallize that, oh, I'm doing this career?
2045 feels about the time it's going to all make sense. I feel like I have been very lucky to celebrate every little win because I didn't go to school in New York or LA and didn't come out of Juilliard with all my classmates suddenly like being on TV and movies. And so like when I got the abridged Hamlet in Roanoke, Virginia as a non-act, I was like, don't be jealous.
Yes.
So I just was like really excited to get every job. I think I'm stuck on the make sense part of it. And that's why the 2020, 2040 answer is like, oh yeah, like this career happened. And I guess some people are really conscious of the decisions they're making. And I think mostly my career has been like, take me where I fit in. So yeah, so I think I always wanted to be an actor. I started in high school at a performing arts high school. So that was very clear. But my parents were also very clear that I needed to go to college before I did anything really professionally, which is funny because they're both artists.
I was just going to say, being a poet and a novelist, your mom's a poet and a novelist and your dad was a Buddhist. That's what's online. Set me straight here.
Okay. So I grew up in San Francisco, which is a very specific kind of upbringing that if you're from San Francisco, you probably had the same upbringing as me. And then the rest of the country is like, what the fuck happened? So it's both normalized and not normalized. My mom is a poet and a novelist. My dad was a musician. He was in a Balinesian gamelan. He was a therapist for a while. He was a drug dealer for a while. His memoir will come out at some point, I'm sure.
He's checked a lot of boxes.
Lived on a commune, a lot of creative. He was in this thing called the Pageant Players, which was, they would go on in the intermission of the Living Theater. And the Living Theater would be like, give them all your money, you bourgeois pigs, because they were like more counterculture than the Living Theater. So he likes to be like, I have a theater background, like you got it from me. And I was like, you just wanted to fuck one of the women in the company, which is
Let's just set it straight. Then that's interesting to me that you've got these two very creative parents, but they really wanted you to go to school. Did they care what you went for? Because you still majored.
Yeah, I majored in theater.
Yep.
They were super supportive of me being an artist. And there was never any question of, oh, you need to get a real job and make money, because they didn't. So I didn't have that chip on my shoulder of I'm a failure if I don't make a good living at it. Because I saw like beautiful art made by people who didn't make a living at it all the time. So it wasn't about that. Like I think back and now I'm like, oh, they knew something about who I was, which was not ready for.
So then how does going from University of Minnesota and then you go to New York next, how does that prepare you for auditioning? Like a lot of conservatories, a lot of theater programs, especially the time that you and I were starting, sometimes prepared you for the real world of being an actor and sometimes didn't. Like once you hit New York, what was auditioning like? Because girl, I had no idea. It feels like you landed, you got your typical Law and Order, and then it felt like you were going from like pilot to pilot. Is that correct?
You know, isn't it funny? We all look at each other's like IMDb's and we're like, girl, works. And then inside of it, you're like, absolutely not. There was so many like sobbing in Union Square Park after my waitressing job. No, so I started doing plays. I moved to New York in 2004. And hoping to do plays. I didn't have an agent or manager. We didn't have a showcase in my program at that point. So I moved to New York with $400 and looked for a job and had a romantic sense of that, which was good, right? Because you better have a romantic sense of that because it's
It fuels you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting listening to a few episodes of this. I was thinking, you can't, let's be honest. You think about, what am I going to talk about? And I try not to think too much about that stuff, both in acting and in interviews, because I find that the best things just happen off the cuff and it's not planned. But I was thinking about like this idea of what fuels you. And I remember watching the Michael Jordan Last Dance and how he like creates an enemy for himself, and that seemed to fuel him. And I was like, oh, like I definitely have like an underdog mentality that fuels me and has also gotten me in trouble at times, because I always think of myself as not the thing, that I'm the underdog. And in some ways that's been true. In some ways that's completely not true. And when it isn't true, it's actually not very kind to others to think of, to be perpetuating that.
Talk to me about that, because I'm curious. Whenever my agent would be like, this is so yours. This is so yours. I wouldn't get it. When my agent's like, they don't want to see you. Then I would fight. I had this fight in me to be the underdog and to prevail, showman that I can do. That's the type of material that I want to be doing. Yeah. How does the underdog, how did that serve you? Was it you were going for parts that people weren't technically seeing you as, or was it just actually winning the roles at certain levels when people... But I feel like your background, your parents were supportive of it. It doesn't matter. Who are you trying to prove that underdog mentality to yourself in auditions? Was it for work?
Yeah. To be honest, I think there's I've always been attracted to the other. I've always been very much interested in what's not happening in mainstream, and probably from my upbringing. And so there is a sense of wanting to be outside of things that is both true and untrue, because I will feel like an outsider, and there's a lot of judgment in that I think is completely unhelpful. And I think as I've gotten older, I've shed a lot of that, although it still rears its ugly head sometimes. Like I tend to I'm not doing that. That's not for me. Okay, I'm just going to get straight to it. Beauty is one of those things, right? Yeah. When I was coming up, I felt like I wasn't pretty enough to be on TV, right? Whatever is true or not true. This has nothing to do with my whatever. But that's what I felt like. And I would go in for the Gossip Girls and those things. And so then I would feel like, fuck that. I don't want to be pretty. Like this is my lane. And the truth is, sometimes I think I just was talking myself out of being in an in-group in order to fuel myself to actually, in some ways, get in an in-group. It might have just been a different in-group. I haven't actually totally thought this all through, by the way. This is what was coming up as I was listening to your podcast. And I was like, oh, that'd be interesting. I wonder if I will end up talking about that.
It relates to me. What I can see it immediately relate to some of the roles that you've played, and you're so talented. I'm going to take words out of your mouth, and this might not be justifying what you're trying to say, but I think there's something about being an attractive person, but not being attractive enough, or being too attractive, right? We're constantly judged on, obviously this is a visual medium, but then having so much more to give to the character other than just being this, oh, it's not this kind of pretty. We want this kind of pretty. So if anything, those roles, you were bringing so much more to it, right? So sometimes it wasn't just about the beauty, or the other roles are better, right? I don't know if you've ever switched hair colors. I was looking to see, but when you're a blonde, what you get to audition for versus the moment you switch your hair and you have a different headshot, what you get to go in as a brunette or a redhead or a dark hair. You can see it immediately on the page, how we perceive ourselves in that medium. And I feel like that way of thinking kind of completely served you. The first time I saw you on screen, and you can pick any audition story before this if you want, but the Newsroom, I remember watching it and being like, this is it. Who's this? There's something very appealing about how present you are on screen that really draws you in. And then I feel like you're off to the races. You're the worst. There could not have been better casting. And I know you probably talked about this a million times, but I want to know the lane, the groundwork. Is it Newsroom that gets you're the worst? Is it something else earlier where it's like, In Men We Trust, Spellbound. I know Traffic Light, you guys went for a season, but it felt like a lot of here's a pilot, you got into that track. So I want to know how you get into that track, especially with no agent manager. Like, how do we find the agent manager?
Yes.
How do they start giving you those pilots?
I'll go back. I went on a whole, my inner monologue from this afternoon, but I
love it though.
So basically I moved to New York without anything. A casting director named Kathy Ranking had seen my final show at college and was like, you should meet with this manager. And I said, okay. And then I saw he was in LA and I was like, I'm moving to New York. So I never called him. Here's lesson number 1, folks. So I'm like 9 months, 10 months into waitressing in New York and just trying to figure it out. And I did New York Fringe Festival. I got a little play where they asked me to be naked in a bathtub. And I was like, I'll get in the bathtub, but I'm not taking my clothes off, which I'm glad I did. And then I did a 3.5-hour Gorky play called The Philistines at Shetler 54, which was 14 of us on stage. And one day there were 2 people in the audience. And I was like, can we just go home? And then they made us do, because we were non-equity, there were no rules about it. And they made us do a 3.5-hour Gorky for 2 people. I'm so sorry to those 2 people. This is my public apology. This is my black square apology. I'm so sorry. So I was kicking around making $0 and waitressing, lying my way into waitressing jobs too, because I hadn't done that before either. And I called this manager in LA and I said, I know you're in LA, but I'm in New York. Do you have anyone you'd recommend? Kathy told me to reach out. And he was like, I work with people in both coasts. And I was like, oh, that's how okay, got it. So he was in New York in a couple of weeks and we met at a coffee shop and he said, okay, I'll represent you. And he ended up putting me with a company that is now defunct called Leading Artists, which was a small agency, 3 agents. And then I started to get auditions, mostly for theater, for guest stars on things like Law and Order, the things shooting in New York. I can't tell you how many Law and Orders I auditioned for. My God. I remember the one I got, I was like, how? There are 50 people every time. How did I get this one? Because I'd just been going in and not getting them for so long. So it took a long time. Yeah. So I got there in 2004. I think my first thing was 2006. Yeah. So it took a couple of years, but I was doing enough things that I didn't want to kill myself, including the artist's way many times to try to call myself an artist. Even though I didn't have that chip on my shoulder, it sucks to be rejected. Constantly. And it sucks to work 40 hours a week on your feet. Yeah. So I was still sad, but I actually booked a 1-scene role at the Berkshire Theater Festival with Garrett Dillahunt, I think was playing the lead. I was very excited. Night at the Blue Iguana. And I was so excited. It was going to give me my equity card, but I had to pull out of Great River Shakespeare Festival, which was the non-equity Shakespeare that I had been doing. But so I did it, and I felt like I'd burn bridges with the people that I loved the most, my chosen artistic family, and I felt so devastated. And then a month and a half before the Berkshire show, I auditioned for a show at Playwrights Horizons called The Pain and the Itch. And I got that, and I had to pull out of the Berkshire Theater Festival. So I ended up actually, also before that, I had gotten the acting company and my agents made me turn it down because they said, we need you in town. And I didn't work at all for the entire length of the acting company job. I just waitressed. So then at the very end of that, I got Night at the Blue Iguana, pulled out, got the Playwrights Horizons audition. And that's the one that I feel like changed my life, to be honest.
What do you think? Was it who saw it? Was it how you approached yourself as an actor? What shifted?
It was just opening a door to the New York theater scene. All the casting directors came to the play. All the theater community came out. I remember turning to Mia Baron, who was in that show, and saying, they just asked me to do a reading at Manhattan Theater Club. And she was like, girl, get ready. That's every week. Don't do too many. You need to make a living. They don't pay. But I was so excited to get asked to do a reading. So it was just it was like an intro to a community that I didn't have access to before. And I think it was Bonnie Timmerman put me in a movie based on that. And I showed up thinking I had to do a Russian accent because I had a Serbian accent in the play. And then I was like, that was like my trick, was like, I was like, maybe she's Slavic whenever I couldn't figure out a role. So I'd audition for this little part in a movie called Deception with a Slavic accent. And then I got to set and I was like, so Slavic, right? And they were like, what? Bonnie just put me in the movie. And I didn't know that. I thought like I'd gotten the job because I went into audition. And I think Bonnie was just like, use this girl. It's one line.
This one. Yes.
But it was all improv. So we just improved a little tiny scene. And I got to make Ewan McGregor laugh, which was great.
What could be better? So then how translate, because so many actors write in about this, like the transition from theater, right? Like now you're feeling yourself in this realm, right? Or at least you're invited into this community. How does that transition into television work? Because all of a sudden, then it feels like it's interesting that you said earlier, I don't think I have a face for television. And then all of these beautiful shows, they start really lining up. So what was the transition from now getting into a theater community to getting into the television community?
It was just slow and steady wins the race. What the biggest issue I have right now about the fucking self-tapes, man, is there is no way to develop community, to have that 5 seconds after your audition with a casting director, to actually like connect as a human. I just feel so bad for everybody right now because my transition was because I went in 90 times for these casting directors and they knew me and they knew who I was as an actor, but also started to get to know me as a human and root for me. That's what we do. So it was just very slow in my mind. And I remember getting my first pilot, which was supposed to be a series regular. And then when I got it, they were like, just kidding, it's a guest star. And they'll make you a series regular if it goes to series.
We're going to save our money. Welcome to the playground. Now the business side of it. Of course, you're very talented to be here. Thank you so much. But since we're gifting you this. Which,
by the way, was also an accent. I had a New Jersey accent and I booked the job. And then when I showed up, they were like, no New Jersey accent, apparently. The accents were really good at getting me a job. And as soon as I had the job, they decided to take the accent away.
That's hysterical. Because that was going to be one of my questions. Because it feels like later and right now, it feels like you're popping around to different accents so effortlessly. But I didn't know that this was something at the beginning of your career you just didn't get to put on television.
Yeah, apparently. A lot of my first things, I used to say it's either an accent or I'm like sobbing because as a young girl, there's mostly the roles are you're somehow being abused. And so those are the options. So funny was accents and then abuse for the drama.
In Newsroom, were you emotional? I remember the park bench scene or there's something. Were you emotional in this? And if I remember, I
punch him. I know I punch him, but I don't think there was crying on the Newsroom, but that was when the camera stopped.
Okay. If you're willing to go there, I want to hear about that audition, especially because it's season 2, right? Everybody knows season 1. Oh, here comes this big storm of a show. And when you're a part of season 1, a lot of people don't know what the show is going to be. Hence all these great pilots that you've had that they're like, and we're going to let this live here. How was the audition for Newsroom versus the translation to working in that environment?
So I auditioned in New York. And we had maybe 24 hours with very dense 2 pages of dense Sorkin dialogue. And I remember getting it and I was like, I know what this sounds like. I'm a huge West Wing fan, loved the Newsroom. I was just like, I know what this is. And I was like, I'm not memorizing this. I'll fuck it up. And I know it's got to be word perfect. I literally went in there and I read it. But I had the rhythm and I knew I had the rhythm. Like I knew that I did a really good job, but I was definitely on the page because I was like, you can't slow down and we don't have enough time. And I think that's probably why I got the job because that's so important to him and to that show is that rhythm. And if you're trying to do that without knowing every comma, and then I got to set and I thought I knew it all and I didn't. And I couldn't get through one of the speeches. And I cried afterwards. And God bless Allison Pill, who's a friend of mine now. But she just was like, I cry all the time. It's okay. I was not made to feel like, oh, you've completely fucked up this entire show. But then I had 3 weeks off between that scene and my next scene. And I just hired someone to run lines with me every single day until actual.
That pressure is so hard, that language, even the rhythm of it. And because he does get so specific, it is hard to translate from an audition where you can support that into being on set where you've got 100 people looking at you, hitting that space.
Yeah.
What kind of tools did you develop then for that type of recovery? We talk about that a lot on here. Recovery after either auditions that kind of don't go in your direction or you feeling like you're that, but then also getting to set and using your instrument and how you recover, whether it's emotional or whether it's just highly stressful. Even in that moment, I know you said you cried later, but how, as far as resetting yourself to do the take again, how did you set yourself up to finish that day?
I mean, it was probably just deep embarrassment. And you see it too. I see it on sets now. It's so hard to come in as a guest star. And it's even harder when you're an under 5, right? Because you are just holding on to those lines desperately. They are your chance. They are your everything. And it's funny, Heather and Des on You're the Worst, actually maybe Chris did too. They would say they'd hate being in like the big group scenes where you have 2 lines and they'd be like making a mountain out of a molehill.
It's so true. It's the hardest job. It's the absolute hardest job to do. You're watching a tennis match and you're going to run through and grab the ball at one point and toss it back. And
it's awful. I've seen it happen. I remember somebody on one of the shows that I was a regular on flubbing their 2 lines over and over again. And I just wanted to be like, it's so okay. We mess up all the time. The regulars mess up all the time too. You do your best, but it's really okay. Take that pressure off of yourself. My dad is Buddhist. So he always, whenever I'm like, oh, I'm worried I'm going to fuck it up, he goes, don't worry, you will.
I love that. Don't worry, you will.
Yeah.
That's a piece of advice. Then you're not trying to make it perfect anymore at all, or make it
exactly, which is the death of art. So I think it's really about just like being like, okay, I'm going to be really bad. And I'm also going to survive being bad. And God knows I've been bad. I don't know about you, but have you been bad? I've been bad.
Yes. I told you about the audition that started this all, but I've had to excuse myself from an audition room before where I'm like, I can't speak today. I'm so sorry. Like my human is not available for this. I've had to take myself out of audition for months because the anxiety got to be too much after having my kid. My postpartum anxiety was so high that just stepping into an audition room, I would know everything. And then I would get in there and it was like, I just went, my fight or flight was so high. My instrument just wasn't available to work in that kind of situation. I've had many cycles. I call them like winter, spring, summer, and fall, where I'm like, I'm in a flow. Things are working. Story makes sense to me immediately. And then there's other days where it just doesn't. But I also noticed too, on some of my worst days on set, it's the end product that those days, actually, those scenes sometimes cut together the best. And it's those days sometimes where you feel like you nailed the audition or you feel like you nailed the day. And then you see the scene or you see the audition later and you're like, yeah, no, it didn't really resonate the way I thought, or the impact or the effectiveness that it was going to bring. So I've always told myself, and even when I'm working with actors now, it's like, we can't really trust how we feel in the moment, because that's not accurate at all. We're surrendering to the feeling of the story or the person. And then when you bring yourself into it, when you finish the scene, you're like, how was it? You're like, I don't know. Were we here?
It just shows how little control we have as actors. I don't know. Have you shadowed at all?
Yes.
Shadowing was so illuminating for me.
You do that on You're the Worst?
I did that on You're the Worst. I did that on Welcome to Flatch. I did that very briefly on the franchise. I followed Anu Valia's edit for a show that she did. And the edit is wild to see all the different options. I've also seen non-actors become actors in the edit. Like I've seen the opposite go, where like people are terrible and then they're edited into a performance. And even I just had this happen on the franchise where I, like, the day that I was most proud of my work, like, just felt, and I know it was good when camera is, and you're like, fucking got camera. That's the biggest,
Mm-hmm.
And they put me in ADR and went to the back of my head and ADR'd a new joke in. And I was devastated. I was like, what happened? But you know what? It's not my show and it's not always my moment. That's the lesson. It doesn't matter. Maybe that was a great moment for me or showing what I can do, but it didn't make sense for the story they're trying to tell in the character. And I can't fight that. And it goes the other way. So when I've had a bad day, I'm like, they'll fix it in the edit.
There's been days where I've walked off set. I'm like, we can edit that, right? We can edit the garbage that I just gave you, and they laugh. I think the editor's should be your favorite person on set.
Absolutely. Like for the actors, that's where your performance is made on film and TV.
Absolutely. And speaking about editing or understanding story, I have to circle back to You're the Worst. I want to know this whole audition from start to finish, this coming into, and then I want to hear any other audition story you want to share. But You're the Worst, obviously, with Stephen Falk at the helm of this, who created Weeds and stuff. Tonally, you could figure out some stuff, but I want to know how much information they gave you other than the pilot and your creation of Gretchen. I just loved it through and through. So well cast, so well executed. A story that we really needed, right? The anti-hero, the person that like doesn't fit in the box. Dear God, thank you for creating a show like this. Really, truly. So I want to know, from the moment of you getting it, was it something that you read and you're like, I know this, I got this?
But again, I had that chip on my shoulder and I was like, but they'll cast someone. I had a whole speech about, you think someone like you gets with someone like this? And I was like, that's taking me out. I won't get it because I don't have the this. Right.
Can I also just preface before you answer this that I saw somewhere online, which was 2013. There was all these great articles of next actress to watch, give her her own show. And I saw some of those articles coming out in 2013. So I didn't know if that was from Newsroom or if that was maybe some stuff that was misquoted time-wise from You're the Worst. Because it feels like you were getting this traction.
I don't know. I done some cool stuff that year, meaning, Newsroom came out and definitely the industry watched. Like, it's a really interesting thing, like what the industry watches versus what everybody else watches. Mm-hmm. And it's fascinating. Like, I have friends on huge hit shows who, like, fame-wise are here, but nobody in the industry watches. And they are struggling to get jobs. That's crazy to me. But so the industry watched Newsroom. I did Wolf of Wall Street. I don't remember if it come out, but that was a cool job to get. Mm-hmm. Definitely felt, and I didn't even, again, because I like to feel like the underdog in some way. Like, I remember being like, whatever, I got 5 lines in a big movie, like nothing. And
like for Wolf of Wall Street, did you get to improv? Because I've talked to so many people who did that job, and it was
it was all improv.
It was all improv. Did you walk into the room and they were like, whatever you want to make of this for the audition?
I actually don't really remember that audition so well. I remember going in, and I know I improv'd a little bit, but I can't remember what I did. I also didn't get that job. They hired someone else, and then that person couldn't do it, and then I got the job. So that was like one of those ones that came later. And I hadn't gotten the job. I got it. We improv'd a little, but I was like, I just never thought anything was going to make any difference, actually, is the truth. I thought it's all a slog. I've seen so many of my friends get success. Mm-hmm. They're the next yada, yada, and then nothing happens and they don't work for years. So I just never, and there was this incredible, first of all, the whole cast, supporting cast of Wolf of Wall Street is just quality, wonderful actors and people. And there's this actress, Stephanie Kurtzuba, who's a little older than me. And she also had about the same amount of screen time that I did. And that girl, every time the camera was up, she's like, where am I in the shot? Every time she had a line, she ate.
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
From scene study classes to audition classes.
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created the Bridge for Actors.
A collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
To a working actor.
And I just remember being like, and not in an obnoxious way, not in a this is about me way, in a I bring value and I will show you my value kind of way. And I had never seen that. You see the other a lot. You see a lot of, look at me, I'm doing the thing. But that was like, she was a little older. She had a little more sense of who she was and what she brought to the table. And I would be sitting behind the sound guy reading a book, being like, I'm here for the week. She would never. She'd be like, where am I? Where am I? I think I'm going to go stand over here. Is that okay? And she would just figure out a way to be present. She has done 3 projects with Scorsese since then. Like she's one of his go-to people because she showed him who she was, what value she brought, and she just killed every moment and took those moments. Whereas I thought, I'm going to be in the background. I'll do my job, I'll do the thing, and then I'll step away, and I don't want to be obnoxious. And it takes a certain kind of confidence, like true confidence in yourself, not insecurity that looks like confidence, but real confidence to do that. And I remember being like, you learn lessons from all the people you work with. Yes. And Stephanie taught me a lesson. I was like, okay, if you got something, show up.
I love that kind of collides. Think about it. You got Scorsese, you're watching her, you've got Newsroom, where you have to be so on and so high level and so word perfect, grammatically word perfect. You've got these 2 experiences that kind of funnel into an opportunity to lead your own show.
Yeah.
But it's still interesting that when You're the Worst comes around, that you're like, they're going to give it to somebody else. Like, what? Who else?
But again, I'm probably using that's probably serving me in some way. And the reason why I say like sometimes it's really helpful is because obviously it's gotten me jobs and fueled me. I think when it's not helpful is even in like relationships with other actors sometimes, because I always thought of myself as the underdog, I would maybe not think of something as bragging because I was, like when I was young, this sort of a lack of awareness around like where other people are at in their journey, and like that this is a very intense industry to be in, especially as a woman and going up for the same things. And maybe I was insensitive at times. So I think it's both served me and also maybe made me say stupid shit sometimes. That's all.
All trying to figure it out. And I think every experience, it's like it's like going to camp again, right? Where you're like, oh, new personalities, new egos, how do I fit in here? You are going to camp every single time. Is this a camp where people are going to like me, not like me? Should I say something? Should I not? It's such a work of art for ourselves, I think, to show up and be present in those moments and be fully, I don't know. I vacillate between feeling like it's too much ego and then not enough ego. And where do you sit with it? I
don't know. I don't know that there's an answer. All I know is I feel when I am good with me, I say a lot less stupid shit. That's all. So, and I
like that. That's the quote of the episode.
Yeah. Great. Great.
Just kidding.
We'll see how much stupid shit I say right now. We'll see. We'll get a temperature gauge of where
you're
I am
the worst. You can
my
say
mental
any
health.
of the stupid shit that you absolutely want to. It's so epic.
Yeah, so you're the worst. And I was the underdog of You're the Worst because I also didn't get that one. I mean, I did eventually, but I had auditioned the first time in the room. I was doing a show called We Are Men, which got canceled after 2 episodes, but we shot 5. So I was doing a play in New York at the Rattlestick, and I was flying out on my Mondays to shoot like 5 lines on We Are Men, playing Cal Penn's wife, who's a dreamboat. I'm only going to drop nice names. I love that. So I would go in and it was great. I was making $285 a week at the Rattlestick, but I was doing We Are Men, which was like $2,000 a week just to go say my 5 lines. I was like, this is amazing. So while I was in LA saying my 5 lines, I auditioned for You're the Worst, which was great. And Steven and I had met we had had coffee for a pilot of his the year before. Someone had recommended me. And we were wearing the same sunglasses. We're both from the Bay Area. And we got along like a house on fire. And he says that he walked away from that meeting and saw that I got another pilot. Like I wasn't available even. Like I was out there testing that time and I had gotten the thing I tested for. So then I was not available. And he had followed me on Twitter back in those days and then had unfollowed me. So when I went into the room, I think, speaking of stupid shit that I say, I was like, is this awkward for you that you've unfollowed me on Twitter and now here I am? And he was like, whatever. And I was like, I probably shouldn't have said that. And then I got a call back. And then I think there were two calls. I think that was the initial one and then a callback and then a test, but maybe I'm making that up. So the test, I come out and I test with Chris Gear and another guy. And it's like a mix and match. Heather is there too. Des was not at the test. And we're doing a mix and match. And I'm like eating a muffin like I have red lipstick on. I'm eating a muffin. I end up a mess. I go home and they're like, you didn't get it. And I was like, okay. And they're like, but they didn't cast the other girl either. And I was like, okay, that's not my business. I didn't get it. And then I got a call being like, they're not letting you go. They want to retest you. Steven's going to come to shoot his episode of Orange is the New Black. You're going to meet him at his offices and you're going to retape. I was like, okay. And they were like, I hope FX doesn't hate me for this, but I'll just say it. I love them. And they were very kind to me after this, but they were like, they want it more Meg Ryan. I was like, have you read the script? That was my first thought. Now, to be fair to FX, who knows how this was translated? It might not have even been from casting. It might have been my agent who ended up saying that. Who knows where that note came from? But that was in my head. And I was like,
how do you take that note?
I was like, what does that mean? And basically the essence was they wanted me more likable was essentially the note that I got. Which again, I was like, have you read the script? And again, who knows where this note comes from, right? Because I'm not talking to anyone directly. And so I go to the offices and I retest with Steven. And I'm like, I'm wearing like much chiller clothes. There's no red lipstick that's all over my face. I'm just like, okay. And I'm like, dude, good luck. I've been here before. I auditioned 10 times for a Fox pilot that they kept saying sexier. And I just kept putting more stuff in my bra. I was like, that's what that means, right? And still didn't get it. And the creator had wanted me for that job, but the network didn't. So I'd been there before and I was like, you want your show to get made. It's not going to happen. And so he retested me and I was like, good luck with your show. This is very sweet that you were rooting for me, but not going to happen. And then they were like, okay, you can try it. And so I got the job because Steven really fought for me. And then we shot the pilot. And then he used me as an example to like get music he wanted. He'd be like, really? You don't think that song's good? Remember Aya? So it all worked.
That's amazing. Remember my decision versus your decisions.
And they were so good to me. Honestly, FX is just like such a dreamy place to work. You actually get to know the executives. It's such a nice, warm environment. They never made me feel bad, but it was a harrowing process.
I can't imagine anybody else in that role. I truly can't. I can't imagine even Meg Ryan in that role. It doesn't work for me. It does not work for me. What was the number one thing that you took away after leading your own show? You threw in nuggets of things that you learned from other people along the way. It's a responsibility I know it was the four of you, but it really was heavily relying on you and Chris, I think, to really make this work. What's the one thing learning day in and day out, being with a character? What was it, 5 years, 6 years?
5, I think, maybe 6, including the pilot, even though we weren't shooting all.
Yeah.
Just kindness. I think I used to say you cast all the guest stars as the leads because we were all coming into this having done the time. Mm-hmm. And that was such a gift because there wasn't a lot of ego. Like we were so grateful to be there and so happy and so loved each other and so loved the writers. And so, not that there weren't problems. Of course, stuff comes up, but it was a very special time in all of our lives. And kindness is so important. Yeah. When the leads are unkind, it makes the whole set bad. There's plenty of other people who can make the set bad. You can have a nasty director or a nasty producer that really sours things, but I think it also, you got to have leads who are like, no, we don't treat people badly here. And so I think we all just were like, yeah, let's like always make the guest stars feel good because we are them.
It shows in the show. It shows in the show, pun intended. But your guys' chemistry, just how it all unraveled, it was really beautiful. Really, truly, it is like you hope in your career that you get that. So then I have to ask the tough question. Okay, so that ends 2019. Then we go into a pandemic. You've done several shows since, but we're going into the lane of that thing called the self-tape that you don't like. And since we live in that land, I'm so curious how you tackle your self-tapes, especially after leading a show and understanding the business of how it's going to work. How are you auditioning now? And you can choose any, you've got real people, you've got the boys, you got the franchise. I don't know if some of these are offers, which would be amazing as well. Oh, actually, that was going to be my question. Did UTA come in during You're the Worst, or were they present before you did the show?
They were before. So weirdly, I went from leading artist to Gersh. My agent at Gersh left Gersh to go to Paradigm. Paradigm had rejected me before I had a TV show. And then they said, come on over when I did. I think I'd done Traffic Light. And I went, fuck you. I'm a sensitive little soul. I was like, absolutely not. They didn't want me. They didn't believe in me then. They can't have me now. Yeah, like I'd done so much. But I was just like, I don't want to do that. So I ended up getting set up with UTA. I think it was right when Traffic Light was just starting to air. Like I remember right before the upfront, signing with UTA and getting a team there. And then 6 months later, I was like, I miss my agent who found me in theater and came to 10 shows and was like, come to Gersh. And I just miss Chris. And I was like, I think I'm going to leave UTA and I'm going to just go to Chris at Paradigm. And so I left and I found, this is bullshit. I want to say this person's name, but I won't. So I went to Paradigm and my agent, Chris, was like sending me out and he was trying to get me an audition for something like a procedural something. And they were like, come on, she just got dropped by UTA. And I was like, did not get dropped by UTA, but interesting. That's the idea, right? You couldn't possibly leave a big agency to go be with a smaller agency. Paradigm's great, by the way. It was like, that was the perception. And it was like hard to get me in rooms again for some reason. I was like, what nonsense is this? That's a very specific casting director. So yeah, who I've had trouble with before, just in terms of the way they do things. So anyway, and then Chris ended up at UTA.
UTA.
Yeah.
So and then it comes full circle back.
And now he's my manager.
It's also interesting just how there is so much of this is the business. And if you don't understand the business or even if you do understand the business, sometimes that's the most frustrating fucking thing is your talent hasn't changed. Your reputation hasn't changed, but now somebody wants to attach. It's all relationships in this business. And Gersh is great. Paradigm's great. UTA is great. So why does it matter?
Yes, it doesn't. And it's also just, I learned a lot of those lessons young about the nonsense of the business. I remember auditioning for a play and the casting director giving me bad feedback and then seeing me in the pain and the itch and then walking me around the party being like, I discovered her. And I was like, got it. So that was one. Then when You're the Worst came out, like your star meter like goes up or something when you have a show. And sometimes it organizes movies by star meter. So I was not in a movie called Begin Again. I had been cut from that movie. I'd had one scene or two scenes that were cut out of that movie. And my local paper billed me as third billed under Mark Ruffalo and Keira Knightley. I got phone calls from journalists who were interviewing me about You're the Worst and be like, congratulations on Begin Again. That was fantastic work. And I was like, not in that movie. So I got a real hit of this is not real. I waited on when I was a waitress at Chat and Chew in Union Square, I waited on my agents once. And I just was like, this is crazy. I also ran into commercial producers who I'd just done a commercial for and had to be their waitress. And you just see it like, and I was treated like crap as a waitress often. And then, but if someone recognizes you from TV, suddenly you're great. I got a good hit of that to be like, oh, this is all nonsense. Don't believe the good. Don't believe the bad.
Yep. And just stay focused on what you can do. Because I mean, your work, I want to ask about First Lady. I need 2 more hours because I feel like you truly do have, you can't put you in the box. So that's why I'm curious. Are you being very selective with material? Post You're the Worst. If you're willing to go there, like, how are you deciphering? Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Okay, now I'm going to go throw down this tape that I fucking absolutely hate to do. How are you handling the business part of it, of continuing on your career once you've been at a really good mountaintop? And look, You're the Worst was amazing. I don't know how many people actually saw it. I feel like industry was watching it. It was one of those shows that it was like Schitt's Creek, where you're like a little delayed and then you get there and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I didn't know if the industry fully met you at the end of that mountaintop, or how you strategized what to do next.
A bit of both, honestly. Again, you think like a job is going to change your life, and it absolutely does. And then it doesn't in many ways. I was still auditioning after You're the Worst. I auditioned for Fosse Verdon, and I had just done a play that Tommy Kail directed. I'd done Stephen Levison's plays when we were 22. Like, I had all the things going for me, and I was still auditioning for that role on TV, on FX.
I was just going to say, that's why I didn't know if maybe that was an offer, but it's such a different role that...
No, I had to audition, and I auditioned for The Boys, and I auditioned for the franchise. So some of my favorite jobs have been auditions, to be honest. But also, like, Girl from Plainville offer came out of nowhere, but Liz... Hannah loved You're the Worst. And then we got on a phone call and geeked out about The Challenge. Yes, MTV's The Challenge. And bonded forever. And now she's a dear friend. So I got a mix of offers, and some cool stuff came my way. True. But then I had to run for some other stuff, and it just depended. Honestly, the best thing that happened to me, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say this, but I got very depressed for 6 months during COVID, out of COVID, whatever we're in a couple of years ago, like 2022. And I was like, I can't function. I can't do anything. I can't. So all these auditions were coming in, and I was like, no. I've always hated self-tapes. It's been a running gag in my agency. I've said no self-tapes. This was before pandemic. I've booked 2 in 18 years. 2
self-tapes?
Yep, 2 self-tapes in 18 years. It is not how I book a job. It is not how I like to work. I hate self-tapes. So I hated them before the pandemic, and then it became everything. So then I fell into a deep depression, and I was just like, I can't do it. I can't audition. Changed my career. Offers came pouring in because everybody thinks you're too fancy. Oh, okay, she's offer only. And I was like, this, more nonsense about the business. Suddenly, like, things were happening because they thought that I was good enough to have that happen. It's just very bizarre. And I was like, no, sweetie, I cannot move. I'm saying no to these jobs because I can't do anything. I turned down multiple jobs. I almost ruined a friendship because I pulled out of a movie because I was just so fucking pressed. But it helped in some way. I came out of that period, and suddenly people were like, oh, she fancy now. And I was like, God damn, like, this just nonsense. Well,
it is nonsense, but isn't it interesting when you put a boundary down because you're protecting yourself, how interesting that's met, right? Versus when you're eager or when you feel good, right? You're like, no, yeah, I'm going to go audition for this. It gives a different energy to it for some whatever reason.
Yeah.
What was able to pull you out of that place? Because again, talking about what we talked about earlier with recovery, auditioning is such a different skill. Even being on set, 2 different muscles. But when your instrument is not fully healthy or available or in a good state, it's hard to navigate those scenes. But was there something that was able to take the brain chemistry and shift it?
I don't know. 1, drugs. 2, which I just temporarily even. 2, journaling. 3, all the sort of normal stuff. Also, it was just like, there's something about the fact that I got to do a You're the Worst, and like the mourning of, oh, that may never happen again. Like to have that kind of, there's been great jobs, but it's also the time in your life that you get those jobs. And it was such a special thing. We have the 10-year anniversary of when it started. We're going to do Vulture Fest next month, which is
can't
wild.
wait.
Wild.
I know. I saw that and I was like, it's been 10 years? Dear God, what? It's crazy.
You just don't get those very often. And sometimes it's not even, you do jobs and they just don't see you. They don't see all that you can do because that's not what that's not the story they're telling. And to be on a show where like they just saw me and they were like, you can do this. And I was like, can I? That's so special and lucky and just incredibly rare. Like it's all lucky. Let's take a breath and pause, and not in a wellness kind of way. I'm not like, oh, I'm just so blessed. So much of this is luck. Mm-hmm. And we all want to believe it's not when we get it. And we want to believe that it's luck when we don't get it. But the truth is, talent, what you look like, all those things come into play, and there's luck. And that is just the reality of it.
I think luck comes down to, it's like getting the good script, getting the good people. I've had one or two mountaintops of that, and then you chase it for the rest of your career. And that is a hard thing to negotiate, I think, as an artist, once you hit one moment of it all came together and we made great, effective storytelling. So then any job thereafter, and it might be another 5 years before another one of those comes around, another one will, but you just don't know when. It's like, okay, I played the lottery. I won this one thing. It's trying to not be precious and hold on to that experience so that you can have that experience again. It's like also once you have it, it's like once you have a baby, when you go to have a second one, you're like, I know what's going to happen. Oh no. So I have to ask the franchise, just because it's current right now, you said you auditioned. Was that a tape or did you go in? Did you force them to see you in person?
That was a tape. That was a tape. It was my husband's birthday weekend, and I was in Chicago outside of Chicago shooting a movie, but I got us a hotel in Chicago for the weekend, have a nice weekend with him. And normally I tape with him, but this was a 5-minute monologue. So I didn't need him to tape. And I was like, great, I'll do it when you're done. So we had this great weekend. And then before I had to go to set the next morning, I did a monologue, and it was great.
Probably plays on all of your greatest strengths. Like I just want, especially someone who doesn't like self-tapes, I ask this question all the time. Like, how do you approach, here's the audition, you're juggling, you're on set. What are your couple of tangible tools that you jump right into to throw this down, other than reading the script? Yeah.
Yeah. But also, our union has now fought for the opportunity to do Zooms. And apparently it's mostly new people doing them because it's often the casting associate. It's like a pre-read they're treating them as. But I'm like, absolutely not. I would much rather do a Zoom. You know why? Because I show up for 10 minutes and I do the thing. I don't spend an hour prepping. Where is the light today? Where am I? This is the first time I've turned a ring light on forever. I always try to do natural light. I try to just okay, I'm going to find a good place. Okay, wait, which take am I doing? I'm going to do that again. Oh, I need to call so-and-so to come over to do that. It's so much work. It takes hours and hours. So if there is an option, which there is now, and you do not do well on tape, I know plenty of people who love the self-tape and book all the time. Good for them. Ask for the audition and I'll go on with an associate. What a gift too. And then I can be like, hey, what's this about? And casting directors, I owe my entire career to casting directors. So I just feel a lot of affinity to being in the room with them. So I'll take a Zoom over a self-tape any day.
I love that. And also I think it takes maybe some time, but I hope what other actors are hearing is that it's a conversation with casting versus a hierarchy with casting. And that's something that I've been trying to instill on other people. And I did a Zoom the other day, and it was after I did it, I was like, okay, this is what my interpretation was, but I wanted to make sure that we're seeing it like this. And since you said that this is a pilot, they don't know anything, I want to give you a different option of how we're doing this and how I'm seeing it in this perspective. And then we had a 10-minute conversation about the book and everything. Then I can do my job better than guessing at it or having a really good tape and then casting, oh, she missed that one thing that everybody, the other 100 actors are missing that one thing. So conversations with casting versus power, right?
It's also, there's this thing, I keep thinking about slowness in our culture. I think I read a great book called Stolen Focus about social media and the algorithms and all what the internet has done to our brains. And there's just a lack of slowness. It's very different to read a headline versus reading an article versus reading a book. And what it does to your actual brain is very different. There is a difference between sending a self-tape where they can watch 2 seconds and be done and having to sit through your audition. The having to sit through it changes the dynamic between you and the person who's watching. It gives opportunity for change. Maybe in the first 5 seconds, I didn't get it. And then I hit. And the casting director will know that and send the tape. Even if they can't get me to get those first 5 seconds right, like in a second tape or there's no time, they'll be like, get through that first 5 seconds. She really lands here. And that's what casting directors do, is they train their directors to see people. They know us so much better than the directors because they've seen us do 20,000 things. And they know the possibility there. I used to be a reader. I loved being a reader. I was a reader for Meg Simon. I was a reader for Playwrights Horizons all the time. And I remember sitting in a room with Elena Aldifer, who's the casting director for Playwrights Horizons. And there was a woman coming in. And before she came in, she goes, so she always goes pathos first. You just have to tell her it's funny. And literally, like the woman came in and she did it, very deep gravitas, very emotional, beautiful. And he was like, okay, we're going to just do a little adjustment here. And then she was hilarious. I don't know if she got the job or not, but it was like the casting director knew that this was something. Let her do the one because she needs to connect into, but she gets it. She's smart. She'll take the quick direction. That's what casting directors do.
That's what casting does do. Look, to have the career that you've had and the work that you're continuing to do, and you're starting to produce now, yes?
I'm trying. I'd love to direct.
That's what I'm excited to. That was going to be my question, is that hearing how you talk and how you talk about actors and how you handle your own acting, it's going to be amazing to see you sit in that seat. When are you sitting in that seat?
We'll see. There's been some almosts. And I would, the Nepo babies of the directing world are actors, right? Because we get to be on sets and then be like, I'd love to direct an episode. And all the directors who have been waiting in the wings are like, motherfucker. That's probably how it'll happen. I don't think I would direct the franchise. I know my limits. I know that's a very complicated show to direct. But I shadowed, they were so kind to me on Welcome to Flatch and let me shadow multiple people, including Paul Feig, and I could have directed that show. I could have done it, but we didn't get a third season.
What I love, first of all, it's such a delight to talk to you. It's such a delight to watch your work, but to start an interview, which I never thought in a million years, you'd be like, I just don't know if I fit in that box, or I'm not this. To hear you so confidently say, I can do that. I'm so excited to see your vision put out and the stuff that you continue to do. What a rad experience to be birthed into this world with two really incredible creative people, to have that be nurtured with some good guardrails, and then have these opportunities to really stretch, show, and shine. You're awesome, babe. Really, truly. What a rad experience to see. Where can everybody find you? And you've got the franchises on right now, but then you've got 3 or 4 other things.
Only social media is maybe Aya Cash, and then a secret hidden pottery account for my other love. Which if you can find it, good luck. That's basically all I do these days when I'm not working. Yeah, maybe Aya Cash. I'm not on anything else. Yeah.
Okay.
And can I just say one thing? Because you said these lovely things. If it's helpful to anybody, because I often feel deeply insecure about my acting or about like auditions or all that stuff. And it's always a battle. I take rejection terribly still. I am convinced I am awful. I know that it's part of our job, but I'm not good at it. But the directing thing, I realized I have great confidence in my taste. and my taste in other people. And so I know that I could lead something because I know I have great taste in other artists. I just would say, identify something you feel really confident about.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And go with that. Because it's almost made me more confident as an actor because I'm like,
that's what I was going to ask you.
I'm confident about that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to backdoor and take that confidence and just know that is actually coming from you being able to do so many jobs and go to so many different camps and still deliver. So no matter how you're feeling inside, I just want you to know that we're receiving it in a completely different way. Thank you to the editors. Thank you to you showing up. But truly, like,
and thank you for this. Like, what a great tool for artists. Like I teach sometimes at like my old school and all that. Like, I'm going to recommend this podcast because it's just such a lovely thing. I was really enjoying listening to other actors just talk about their lives and their process. I know we didn't get too into art of it this time, but it's just resource after resource. So
yeah, no, come back. You've got so much stuff going on and we could talk. So we just started the tip of the iceberg. So we'll have you come back.
Definitely. So nice to meet you.
So nice to meet you. Thank you.